Do you have an all-star HR team? You may feel your team is already performing at a high level, but let's take a closer look. Would your company's top leaders and employees agree that your HR team are operating at a high level? Are team members able to influence top executives on difficult topics? Are team members business and strategy focused on the challenges the organization is facing? Does the executive team trust your direct reports as advisors on human capital issues? If you can answer yes to these questions, you have built an outstanding team. If you feel there is room for improvement, Strategy Focused Group can create a custom development program to elevate the quality of your HR team. Please email us at info@strategyfocusedgroup.com.
Good morning, good evening, depending upon what part of the world you're in. If it's Friday, it is the CEO series where we explore career journeys, trajectory, detours, right, left, U-turns along the way. Our guest today is a very, very dear friend, longtime friend, and collaborator, Kosta Petrov, who's the founder of P World. They just celebrated their 15th year anniversary. It's a global events company behind more than 1,000 conferences in over 40 countries and the world's leading crisis communication boot camp. He's a best-selling author, a former senior public leader in North Macedonia, where he's sitting now, a trusted advisor in PR communication and strategic leadership across the globe. His work spans business, government, and cultures, including co-writing Proud, the country's most successful Eurovision entry, and he is known for helping leaders communicate with clarity, purpose, and humanity. Behind every title, there's a story worth telling. And with that, I say, welcome, my friend. How are you?
So nice to be here, Ron. I mean, I've been following your podcast for a really long time, and I was wondering when you're going to invite me to be your guest, and I'm really happy to be here today.
Well, you know what? We're so glad to have you here, and I'm so glad you're accommodating the situation that we have today. So 15 years you just celebrated, and you took your entire team to Italy to celebrate that, which I think was absolutely awesome in doing that. So walk us through the journey. How did you go from an idea of leaving Dubai and moving to North Macedonia and said, we're going to get into the events business?
Well, there isn't a romantic story, and I'm not a kind of a person that has dreamt his whole life about being an entrepreneur. I never dreamt of becoming an entrepreneur. I liked working for someone else. I loved receiving my salary on the first, not worrying about, how the overall business is going. However, life sometimes gives you things that you think that you don't need, but actually they help you create the most amazing journey of your life. So when I was 21, I got recruited to work in Dubai. So that was 2006. I spent 4 amazing years in Dubai. I saw the best version of Dubai, but also I went through, 2008, the global financial crisis. So in 2010, there was a situation, with the overall global economy where me and my family could no longer live in Dubai. So we had a very small amount together with my wife. And at the same time, we had a 6-month-old daughter. So the question we asked ourselves are, do we stay in Dubai for a couple of months with this amount of money, or we go back home and we start our own business? And it wasn't a very easy decision to make because I've been living out of my country for 11 years. I spent studying in the US. Then I studied university in Prague. I lived in Dubai for 4 years. So going back home for me was like, no way, I'm not going back home, especially to live with my parents. After being, having this freedom for 11 years together with your wife and your small child, you're going back home to start a business in the most uncertain time in modern world history when it comes to, to finances. So at the end, we made a decision to move back home. We moved back home in November 2010. And then in December 2010, 1 month later, we started P World. And yeah, we celebrated 15 years this year, 15 amazing years, some great things, but also, a lot of stress, a lot of nervous breakdowns, but also amazing friendships and a great network.
That's absolutely amazing. When you said you left there, and Bella was 6 months old, and
Yeah.
she's a teenager now.
My daughter is also 15 and my business is also 15. So this 15 years, my business is very much connected to my daughter and to my family, because as my daughter grew, also did my business. And now my daughter is a teenager. And at the same time, what's happening in the world today. It's a very interesting environment. So I'm experiencing also teenage years in entrepreneurship, not just in real life.
Yeah, I said, welcome to the club. Been there, done that. But my daughter is a little older and doing that, so I know exactly what you're going through. So when you talk about that, the dilemma: do I stay in Dubai or do I make the decision to go back and start all over again? So we all get to those points at some point in time in your career. What was the guiding force behind that? How did you say, you know what, let's choose this approach, and you move towards that?
Well, it's different when you have a 6-month-old baby and when you are single. So if we were single, if we were a couple and didn't have a baby, probably it would be more risk. We're like, we'll stay here and I'm sure things will get better. And they got better, thank God for that. But when you have a small baby, you no longer just think for yourself. You need to provide for that baby. You need to, make sure that you have enough to sustain the life with that baby. And economically just didn't make sense for us at that point to remain there, because there was a lot of uncertainty. While back home, I had my parents, I had their home, I had their support. And even though it was very hard to go back after 11 years living abroad, still there was this feeling of safety, that you have this safety network that exists only at home, I guess. Dubai was amazing. I had amazing friends, but people come and go. You never have like long-term friendships, because for a lot of people, it's just a destination for a couple of years. So it was a very hard decision to make, because I loved my life in Dubai. I say to my friends, the biggest curse in my life is that I lived in Dubai when I was so young, because all of my view on the world completely changed. And when it's 5-star in Dubai, it's 5-star. When it's great service, it is great service. So experiencing that kind of life when you're that early in your professional life at the same time was a blessing, but then a curse, because nothing in this world compares to Dubai.
Yeah, I know. It's just an amazing city. I'm here in Nigeria, and and just coming through the traffic and all the backup. And I told the driver, I said, if this was Dubai and they had to come through this right away, they would, within 2 weeks, they would present a plan and they would start digging and they would solve it all, because they don't let a problem exist. They will look for a solution, in doing that. So moving back. So and starting P World from basically nothing but an idea to scale to over 1,000 plus conferences, because we were talking before we went live about your travel schedule. And I look at your travel schedule and I said, well, I thought mine was a lot, but you're all over the place. You're leaving Toronto, you're in the US. Now next year you're going to South America. Is that correct? Is it South America?
No, South America, we are going back again. We did an event in Mexico this year. Next year, we're going to Australia for the first time. That's something I'm really, really excited about.
Yes. Okay, cool. I have some people I want you to connect you with in terms of that. So, did you ever envision 1,000 plus conferences? So we are just doing this just to kind of get started, whatever it is. Did you ever think in terms of would it grow that large?
I knew we're gonna build something special. And when I started the business, even though it was with a very small amount in a very uncertain economic climate, I had absolute certainty that this will work out. Uh, and that absolute certainty was based on the network I built in Dubai. I knew that it doesn't matter where I'm based. I had this amazing network of not just business people, but people have become friends throughout the years. And with their support, I knew that we could build something really special. Now, of course, I didn't envision that, first of all, we'll last for 15 years, because in this 15 years, I've, together with my team, we've experienced practically every possible scenario. And we were joking now in Italy, the only thing we haven't experienced is an alien invasion, which I'm sure is going to happen, in a year or two. So I will check that on my list also. But, because the event business is so stressful, and you finish one event, you immediately go to another event. You don't have that time to stop and look at what you've achieved.
Yeah.
But we are redesigning now our website. We're launching a new website in January, and I was going through all the events that we've done, and I was thinking like, oh my God, we've done a lot, and it's the first time in 15 years when I allowed myself to say, you did a good job. Like, you're too critical of yourself sometimes, but this time you did a good job. And I think that's very important. And I'm sorry that I had to wait for 15 years to have this eureka moment. Yeah. But all of us, we are running towards the future so fast that you forget about your achievements. And I think we all have to stop at a certain point in our professional career and look back a little bit, and celebrate those successes, because all of us have, there are failures, but when you put them on scale, it's always the successes that will prevail.
Yeah. 1,000. So when I saw you guys in Italy and I saw the post, the first thing I thought about, 1,000. So we got 100, 200, 300, 1,000. But then when I thought about it, I say, every week you're in a different country. You're going here. You're going here. You're going here. Yeah, that's possible in doing that. And you built that brand to the communication conference. Yeah. You have speakers from every major entity that's there. And that's shows the draw, because when you reach out to some of these so-called, Sonia and I, when you reach out to these big shots, they're so busy doing other things that they may not have the time. But when you look at the list of speakers you name it, you have people there in doing that. And that comes from the branding piece, correct?
It's branding, but also, and not because it's 15 years, I'm doing a lot of now, like, thinking about all the things that we've done and everything. But I think that why we are here after 15 years is because we really provide both speakers and delegates an authentic experience, and especially because an event, you need to have amazing speakers for an event. That's what sells an event, amazing speakers with amazing stories.
Yeah. And,
we have speakers that we have been working with for 15 years, and they're no longer my speakers. They're my friends, so when I write them, we are organizing an event in Sydney. For them, it's not, I'm going to speak an event. Oh, we're going to hang out with Kosta and the crew, it's that kind of
the crew
relationship. And that's what I'm mostly proud of, that we've built this amazing network of people that have initially come to our event, speak as speakers, but, they have become part of my life. We celebrate each other's successes. We keep in touch regularly. And the events have become like a meeting point 3 or 4 times a year where we meet and have an amazing time. And also we educate, business professionals on trends and everything. But at the end of the day, it's about having a good time, both at the event and after the event.
After the event, yeah, because you build up that network of people. Because so to take this to my side, your wife, Sonia, she does human resources. And I've spoken at so many of their conferences as an MC, as a speaker. And so she's building up that same brand. May not be 1,000 yet, but eventually we'll get there in doing that. So the events business,
1,000 is the joint number of the events of the company. So it's not just the events that I manage. It's like the joint number of public and in-house events with them.
Okay, cool. So how do you stay grounded in that? So who's, when you think about the careers, if you had to choose someone or some people, who would be probably key influencing, and who do you bounce things off of when you're at that point? And we all get there, and you're like, oh, what do I do with this one? Who's your go-to as it relates to that inspiration in your life? Is basically what I'm asking.
They're the same people that I called in November 2010. I told them I'm starting my own business.
Okay.
Are you on board to help me out? And they were like, go with you to the end of the world. And I've been with them to the most amazing places around the world. And I can name them. I mean, it's Sitze Becker, who is one of my best friends. He was a speaker. Now he's one of my best friends. He was an executive producer at the Eurovision Song Contest. Patrick Jeffson, who is the former chief of staff to Princess Diana. Mary Jo Jacoby, who is former VP at BP America. She's the only person in the world that has worked for 2 US presidents, Queen, Prime Minister, but I always tell her your favorite job is speaking at my events. Colin Harris, who is former press secretary to King Charles III.
Okay.
Donald Still, who was a chief communications advisor at BBC. These are the people that have been with us, since day one. And I just spent 4 or 5 amazing days in Singapore with Colleen. So they have been following me for 15 years. And whenever we enter a new market, because, entering a new market is very specific, you need to enter the market with the best. And they are the ones that always, say, you know what, we are on board. See you, wherever you take us, we'll come. We are safe with you. We know we're going to have a great time. So
wow.
If I have to thank someone, it would be them, because really, we didn't have nothing in the beginning, no brand, no reputation, but with them on board, and of course now we work with over 1,000 companies, and we have speakers from all across the world, but they are the ones that, made P World, and I will be forever grateful to their support, but also the amazing friendship we have developed throughout the years.
Wow. So I'm going to go back to the beginning. Why crisis communication? Why did you choose that area to focus on? Was that based on what you were doing in Dubai? There was an angle there, or how did you choose that?
Well, I mean, I studied politics at university, and there was a lot of subjects that were in communication. So PR and communications were always something that I was interested in. But I didn't have that practical experience. Then throughout the events, I learned from some of the best, what are the rules in public relations. And then, because our initial portfolio consisted of a lot of PR summits, but it was always crisis communications that caused the most debate and interest at our events. So that's how we developed the crisis communications bootcamps, which is our strongest portfolio. They're always sold out. We've done them in 25 different countries. And it's interesting how, the world of reputation and crisis communications is rapidly changing, especially, post-COVID. So there is this term that we live in an age of perma-crisis, where crises are happening, multiple crises at the same time. And as a communications professional, you're constantly on the battlefield trying to protect your company's reputation. So there's something weird about public relations professionals that we love the most, the crisis part of public relations. And I tell all of my friends, there's something psychologically wrong with us, because we should be afraid of crisis. But then there is nothing, more satisfying when there is a huge crisis and you manage to solve it in a very humanly authentic way. And at the end, your brand or the person you're representing, comes out of it as not as a winner, but that someone has learned their lessons and will make sure that doesn't happen again.
And that's a learning point that you think of the next time that comes to. So, I've always been amazed by, because, you read the headlines, you say, what were they thinking? What were they thinking as it relates to that? And then I'll come back and I'll say, okay, I would love to see the approach as to how you're going to clean this up. Not that it's going to clean up 100%, but how can I change the narrative? And I can drive the narrative versus the news media driving the narrative.
Well, one thing that I'm 100%, certain about is that a company should plan for every possible scenario out there. every possible scenario should be in your crisis communications plan. And
Mm-hmm.
I was joking, like, who would have thought that as a communications professional in your crisis plan, you need to include the possibility of your CEO going to a Coldplay concert, with his lover, who is head of HR, and that's going to cause such a chaos globally and reputationally for your company. You would never think that as a scenario, but obviously you need to think of, which proves my point. There is no such thing as, for the first time ever. Everything has happened before, and you need to be fully prepared. The problem is that companies are not investing in the crisis preparedness. They're not investing in the crisis communications plan. They don't do tabletops. So when a crisis happens, they're unorganized, and they make the crisis even bigger because they're simply not prepared to manage the whole situation. However, there are experts, of course, that that can help them guide through the journey. But at the end of the day, it's all about preparing yourself for all the possible scenarios that could happen to you and your brand.
I worked for Martha Stewart for 10 years.
I love Martha Stewart.
And she just opened a store and here.
Yeah, I saw the photos.
Yeah. So I say, and I always use this when I'm giving a speech or whatever it is, I say the time that she was going through that legal issue and she was found guilty and you had to lay off an entire division. There's no training for that. No. A lot of that was seat of the pants. There's no go to chapter 23 on paragraph 3. This is how you begin the so-called crisis communication, both externally. I didn't deal with external, but what do I deal with internally? Because I was the vice president of human resources. How do you design that in that level of crisis? And that taught me a lesson that when the problem comes to you, you've got to put your thinking hat on and start coming up with some strategies, because there's no playbook to go by, especially during that time.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, the communications field has evolved a lot. And going back to Martha Stewart, I think that she has probably one of the best reputation rebuilding case studies out there when it comes to personal branding, because she has really, come out of the crisis stronger and cooler, and she's still very relevant in 2025. But that has something to do with. And this is a term that I learned from my dear friend Patrick Jeffson, who was the former chief of staff to Princess Diana. It's all about building forgivability. When you're authentic, it's not like, okay, I'm going to build now a forgivability strategy, but it's coming up from your authentic self. If you're authentic, no matter what happens, people will majority of the people will understand who you are, because you've built your whole profile, your whole business on authenticity. So when a crisis happens, of course, it may hurt your reputation, but the rebuilding process is much faster because you have that forgivability factor. And certain people have it. For example, Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton has a forgivability factor. If it was someone else that has gone through that kind of scandal, they would be probably long gone from the media. But some people have it, some people build it, and some people don't have it, no matter how much you work on it.
So the only thing I'll mention on the Bill Clinton thing, if you were able to rebrand yourself post that because of what happened in that situation, you're pretty cool.
Yeah. Again, I think the forgivability is a huge role in it.
Yeah. I love that word, forgivability. Oh my God, I love that, because when you think of, not that I'm an expert as it relates to that, but forgivability, you screw up. And you mentioned the Coldplay concert and looking at that. And I mentioned that the other week when I forget what country I was in, and talking about that through, from HR policies, those kinds of things, and how would you approach, something like that. And this is why I say, what I've learned is that you look at a crisis, there's so much you can learn from that. So sometimes it's good. A crisis can be good for the organization, because we can rebuild, rebrand, and move a step forward. the non-communication expert kind of.
I wouldn't wish a crisis on anyone. However, if properly managed, it's really a test for companies' authenticity and values. And that's what it is about at the end. Crisis can happen to anyone, personal life, business life, that's life. That's the reality of life.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter if you're in business or in life. It's how you carry yourself through that crisis that shows who you truly are. And if you make a mistake, apologize. Of course, consult your legal team, because sometimes an apology means, something completely else. But I always say to all the people that I work with, the best solution to a crisis is, if you've made a mistake, apologize. Sometimes that's all it takes. A simple "I'm sorry." But Mary Jo Jacobi, who I mentioned before, she always says, for senior executive, sorry is the hardest word.
Yeah. It is. So I'm going to put you in a scenario. You're dealing with crisis communication experts. You're giving a keynote at a CEO conference. What are 2 to 3 key things that you would tell them as it relates to crisis that could be headed towards, maybe they've gone through something? What grounding bullet points would you give them in case something happens? Could you walk them through as to how would prepare the strategy across 2 or 3 key components?
Well, I would tell them prepare. That's what it's all about. When a crisis happens, you don't have time to think of a strategy. You need to execute the crisis communication strategy. And those companies that are well prepared, those are that do well during a crisis. So, number one tip for CEOs: don't wait for a crisis to happen to get the VP of communications at that important table. Usually what happens is, the communications people are not there when strategic decisions are made. But when a crisis happens, call PR. PR needs to solve this. It's like, how are you going to solve this when I wasn't even involved in the whole process of, decision making? I wasn't asked about expert opinion. So one thing that is good about this age of perma crisis is that communications professionals are finally getting that seat on the table. Because without a good VP of communications, without a good communications professionals, you cannot survive in today's era of chaos and polarization. And that's something that I always tell CEOs. Your legal team and your comms team, they are your best friends.
Yeah.
They are the people that you need to have the closest to you and listen to their advice. Sometimes CEOs, it's not because of egoism or anything, but are not used to hear people giving an opinion that is different from their own. But you need to have the right communications professionals around you that will keep you grounded, and make sure that even when a crisis happens, we are prepared for it and we know how to manage it.
So as you go through these conferences, I'm here, and then again, I'm making an assumption that you hear different situations. What is the most, and you don't have to really call it, what is the most unique crisis that you have heard that you're like, whoa, never would have thought? And I reference that back to say, I thought from my side, as a non-communication expert, was the situation at Coldplay concert. Because I'm like, oh my goodness, how do you?
But they managed it wonderfully. I think that's, and I know there was a lot of discussion afterwards, whether getting Gwyneth Paltrow to do that video was the right step. But from my personal view, that's one of the best crisis communications moves. You guys have this conversation, but actually this is what we're going to talk about, and getting Gwyneth Paltrow, who is the ex-wife of Chris Martin. That's like an amazing move. And I would love to have them speak at some of our events eventually. Through the boot camps, we've done, I don't know, we've done over like 80, 90 boot camps. And all of them are, 70, 80 people, very intimate atmosphere. And what I like the most about the boot camps is that people really open up about the things they have experienced, and not just what is being represented in the media, but also what's done behind. And for me, as someone that has done this and is doing this, it's always the psychological effect on communications professionals and the team. Because during a crisis, the first thing that people do is they panic. And if everyone panics, then like if everyone thinks this is it, we are sinking, it's over, then
You're
that
gonna
doesn't
think it is over.
anything. So for me, it's always the human side of crisis communications, because it's a huge toll. It's 24/7. You're being attacked by the media. You're being attacked by the public. Everyone wants something from you. At the same time, you're trying to do your best job possible. So I think, other than preparing for crisis, I think the most important thing is to be there for your team when a crisis happens, because crises do not last. They can be very intense, couple of days, months. They will eventually end, and the effect it has on people, it can be catastrophic. So you have to take care of your team, and you have to show leadership skills, even though sometimes you're not yourself, fully psychologically sane. But someone needs to take responsibility, and show leadership, and especially in situations like that. And I think that's key, taking care of your people.
Yeah, that's key. That Martha Stewart situation was just phenomenal. But here's what I say: in the U.S., specifically New York, if you're a celebrity and you go through what she went through, you go to jail. When she got out of jail, we got a new TV contract. She got a new book, and I look back on that, and it just propelled her to a new heights. But again, it goes back as to the way that was managed, because.
But also, I also think that America likes giving people second chances, and that's, I went to the US for the first time when I was 16, and it changed my life completely. I was living in a post-socialist country. We had more, we were Yugoslavia. It was different from USSR. We had certain freedoms and access to MTV and Levi's and Coke and stuff like that. But for example, I didn't know what motivational speaking was. I didn't know that people talked about anxiety, or like that they've been to prison and how they rebranded themselves. I didn't know that existed. I thought it's like when you do a mistake, you're done. It's over for you. Game over. So at 16, when I went to the US, Barnes and Nobles was my favorite space in the world, and I would read these books and I would be like, oh my God, So no matter what, it's America. I think first of all, you have this sense of anything is possible, which I still believe to this day. When I land in New York, I don't know what it is, the smell of the carpet at the airport or something, my brain immediately switches into everything is possible. But at the same time, I think that as a society, you want to see people as winners, and you want to give people a second chance to show that, this is not who I am, this is actually who I am. So that's one thing about US that is fascinating to me, and will always be.
Yeah. I think a lot of that comes from you fall down, you get up. You fall down, you get up.
And,
you keep.
And you know what? People cheer when you get up, and that's very important.
Cheer when you get up, and you're able to move beyond that. But so I'm going to flip it, because what I went through during that time, and I don't know why I'm keep focusing on that, it made me a stronger person. But I knew, being under all that stress, lay off people and all of that, I knew it was time for me to leave. And I basically walked away with not a job. I said, you know what? I've got severance. And I'm okay. And I'm just going to take some, and I took 3-4 months off. And my family had a summer home down in Myrtle Beach. And I drove down there, and I basically would get up in the morning and go sit on the beach. And I'd stay there all day, just looking out at the ocean. And because I had to reconfigure, because of, I don't want to say what I went through, because I'm sure people went through other things, but being in the human resources side and seeing people going through all the stress, it had an impact. And I said, I just got to walk away from it. And that's what caused everything.
The same thing happened to me when I resigned from politics. I resigned, and then for a couple of months, I didn't want to see a single person. I wanted to
Yep.
be by myself. I think it's like a period of mourning,
Yeah.
but you have to go through that period of mourning to discover yourself.
Okay.
And I mean, it was a very hard period, but at the same time, when your heart, at the end, you feel it in your heart. If do I belong here or don't belong here? Your heart tells you, and if you don't listen to your heart, you know, I think the negative toll on yourself could be catastrophic. But if you listen to your heart in those moments of chaos, and if you allow yourself, and of course, if you can afford to, to have to not do anything for a couple of months,
Yeah.
it's the most amazing thing that can happen to you. It's like, you rise from the ashes. Like, you pick up the things that you love about yourself, you leave those things that are not you, and then you rebuild yourself into a brand new version of yourself, which never existed before, but it's your best version.
Yeah. So I want to get back to the politics. I'm getting into the government and then the book writing. I want to share one side for me was the fact that when I decided to come back, and you mentioned this earlier, which made me make a note of that, it was the 2008 crisis, of financial crisis. There were no jobs.
Hmm.
And going on interviews, nothing. Then there was no interviews. And I'm thinking, did I make the right decision in doing that? I'm questioning myself because there was no bounce back. The story was not the way that I planned it.
Yeah.
But eventually I was able to maneuver and come back. Now, I'm saying that to say, because I'm going to go to you with politics. I remember when you were in politics, you were one of the officials in the government. And I remember when you walked away from it because, knowing the family, I know your family and all of that, Sanya and I would be talking about things and you were doing this and doing that. When did you decide that it was time to leave from government? And you were a pretty big official in your country. When did
Yeah.
you decide that it's time?
I mean, to be honest with you, you know, there was 6 months of, I say, courting, where I was approached by the ruling political party. They needed rebranding, and I was positioned as this crisis communications expert. So for 6 months we were talking. I was thinking whether to accept it or not, and I very naively I accepted it. But to be honest with you, from day one in the job, I knew it wasn't for me.
Oof. Oof.
And that was the hardest thing. And I remember like sitting in the office and saying, you know what, and telling myself, you've made a big mistake, but it's too late now to go back. So now you will start acting, now you will start acting like you're actually enjoying this. And I enjoyed some parts of it, and I'm very happy with with the work that I've done, because I was involved in politics during COVID-19. I was in charge of the economic task force. We came up with all the economic measures, trying to help as many businesses as possible. So I enjoyed that part. And nothing compares to working in government, because like what you do affects millions of people. What I do now, it affects like certain industry, a couple of hundred of people at an event. When you work in government, your idea affects millions of lives. So that adrenaline cannot be compared to anything else.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you cannot act for too long. And the last 6 months, I was completely depressed, demotivated. My alarm would go off, and I wouldn't want to wake up.
Didn't
And
want to get up.
Yeah, I was on a verge of like, I don't want to sound now too dramatic, but it's like, you know what? I was thinking too much. If I resign now, what will people say? Blah blah blah. And then one day I just woke up, and I went to Facebook, and I resigned through Facebook. I didn't inform anyone that I'm resigning, but I knew that if I did it through the proper channels, that they would tell me, "Oh, stay." So I wanted, and to be honest, I mean, it wasn't the most professional thing in the world, but at the end of the day, it was about my own sanity and my own being. And I knew if I continue doing this, I would not last too long, and it affected every possible possible thing in my life, affected my family, because when you're in high politics, they do press conferences against you. The opposition would go and do press conference, and all the press conferences they did for me were on Saturday. So I knew every Saturday morning that my weekend would be destroyed. It was the only 2 days that I had with my family, but I knew that at 10 a.m. there would be a press conference where they would say like millions of lies about me. And it affected me so much that even that time that I had with my family, I couldn't concentrate because, I was just like under constant attack. So my biggest lesson from that journey was like it takes a certain kind of people in politics. Not everyone is meant. No matter how smart you are, no matter how experienced you are, politics is a different scenery. It's a different world. And
totally different.
And you know what? I my whole life, I'm a firm believer of, if I have something in my head, I will do it. 100%. And this is one thing that for the first time in my life, I said to myself, you're just not good for this. There are some things that you're not good at, and I wasn't good at it. So it was an amazing, experience because I got to see things through different perspectives, and and it's not a lot of people get the privilege to see the world from that side.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it wasn't me, and and it took me. So I resigned in 2021. So I've been out of politics for 4 years, but it took me good 2-3 years to, in a way, to get that anger that I felt towards myself that I accepted to be in politics, because there was 2-3 years of constant self-punishment of, oh, why did you? Because one thing about career, when you leave a job and you go to a new company, people will eventually forget that you worked for Martha Stewart because you've done so much. When you do politics, no one forgets that you've done politics.
So that's still the anchor you're carrying around.
Always. Yeah.
10
and for me,
years later.
Yeah. And for me, that was the hardest thing to accept. And now I'm accepted it. I've been in politics. That's fine. I've done like 2 years of politics. And, now I'll continue with my journey.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk about the book. Talk about the book that you've become somewhat of an author. You put books together. Where did that come from? I'm going through so much. I'm building a business. I just transitioned out of the biggest mistake I ever made. I need to start writing. I mean, you see where we're going here? Is that
writing is the best therapy in the world.
Ooh.
A lot of people ask me, why are you writing books? Who are you? I mean, I'm writing books for myself, so like I read through when I'm older, I can go through all the mistakes and all the fun stuff I've been through.
Yeah, I think it's great to chronicle that. I write a lot. When I'll hear something. So one of the things you mentioned earlier, forgivability. I love the word because, life, forgivability. Are we still holding grudges? You said it took you a while to go through that. I was pissed off when I left Martha Stewart because it just wasn't working out. And then when I figured I made a bad mistake, I couldn't get back into work. And so I need to forgive myself. Versus, go ahead. Talk to me through that.
About forgiving yourself?
Yeah, forgiving yourself. I mean,
I think that's the hardest thing because our initial reaction is to punish ourselves. So really, even when I was in politics and after I left politics, I was punishing myself because people constantly reminded me, when I was in politics, my mother would call me and she would be like, oh my God, they're talking shit about you on TV. Why are you doing this to us? Then my father would call me, my friends are calling me, why did you have to accept this? And I personally, felt that I made a mistake in accepting it. But, when people constantly remind you of it, that even creates like this chaos in your head where you're just like feeling like your decision is hurting everyone, absolutely everyone around you. Then my daughter comes, she found, some articles on the internet saying bad things about me. She's like, oh, why are people doing this? So it's like, your decision affects everyone around you and you start punishing yourself. To the extent where you're just like a huge punishing machine, you're just punching yourself for, and there comes a point where you're just like, you know what, you have to be, I don't call it that it's selfish or egoistic. You have to put yourself first. And I don't know about you, but in my society, loving yourself is considered very much like egoistic, selfish. But I realized that I couldn't forgive myself is because I didn't love myself. So I had to go through going back all of these steps back and be like, you know what? Love yourself, learn from your mistakes, and accept who you are. Accept all your possible versions. For me, I couldn't accept the version of being a politician, but now I accept it. So you need to accept all the versions that exist of you, and there isn't only one version. There are thousands of versions. Throughout your life, you create like hundreds of versions of yourselves, and you need to learn to love every version of yourself, the best one, but most importantly, the one that you are secretly or publicly ashamed of.
Yeah. There's a concept called a Johari window. And one of those is that what people see, this is the brand, what you're struggling with that they don't see. And so there's two other versions of that. But that Johari window process, that when you look in the mirror in the morning, you see what you're struggling with. But you cover that up when you're out and everybody's, oh my God, hey, how are you? This kind of thing. But meanwhile, I'm struggling inside. So one of the things I say sometimes when I see people, I wonder who you see when you look at yourself in the mirror in the morning. Do you see what the brand is externally, or do you see the real person beyond that? And even today, sometimes I struggle with that. You're traveling and you're doing all these things. People say, oh my God, you're doing all these cool things. But there's something behind that, and lots of times,
go ahead. If you go on my Instagram feed, all you will see is 5-star hotels and me posing in the most amazing places in the world. But no one sees the behind story. That I have an event, 3 people have canceled, flights are getting canceled. You cannot see that on Instagram.
Yeah,
and a lot of my friends, they tell me, oh, you're traveling so much, you have the best job. For them, it's like I'm traveling on holiday. And to tell you the truth, I haven't taken I haven't gone somewhere in a new country on a holiday. I go to a lot of countries, but it's not a holiday. Yeah, there are 2 or 3 days when, I explore the country, but it's never a holiday. It's always connected to an event. And I don't know. I always tell myself, don't believe what you see, because I want you to see the best part of the job. And also, that's the part that I will remember. I will not remember your flights getting canceled and not making to any event, right? At the end, I will remember the end result. So on one side, we are not showing the full story, but on the other side, it's like what part of the story you want to remember. And I want to remember the good parts of the story.
Okay.
I
look for learning parts of the story. What did I learn from that? And my father would always say, you go through a situation, what did you learn from it? And can you carry that forward? So I've looked at the situations, going back through the career moves and all those things. Bad time, but here's what I learned from that 1, 2, 3. Will that prevent something from happening again? No, it will not. But I want to kind of stay true to myself. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, listen, the learning process is the most important. But have you caught yourself in telling to yourself, I don't want to learn any more new things. I'm happy where I'm right now. I don't need any new lessons in life. You know what? Just let me chill for some time.
I run into a lot of so-called big people who think like that, and they said that. So one of the questions I ask people, I said, "How do you learn? How do you learn about your business? How do you learn?" And sometimes they'll come back and they'll say, work is so busy, I don't really get a chance to read anything, and I have a reading list, but I'm not pursuing it. And they make all these excuses in doing that. Whereas my situation is different. I always have to carry a reading list. I get on a flight. I'm going to do the first hour of that flight as they're getting set, and I'm reading through. Chat GPT will let me summarize it now, and I read through that, comprehend that, and then I move on from that. But that goes on every day.
Hmm. I mean, for me, I agree with you. Like reading is like key, but I'm the kind of reader that I only read nonfiction. I
Okay.
don't read fiction. And I
Okay.
love reading biographies and autobiographies. Like if
Okay.
you come to my library, you will see like biographies of every possible person in the world because I want to go behind their story. I want to see like, what they've been through, what they've achieved. And that's the most inspiring moment for me, when we all have like one picture about a certain person,
Yeah.
when what's
Yeah.
behind it was like what's the story. That's the
Okay.
most fascinating part for me.
Okay. So as we begin to close out, when you look back on your career, 1,000 conferences combined, what are you most proud of?
Again, it's the network, the people that
Okay.
have become my friends. And and I always joke with my colleagues about this. There is that people say, there are 6 connections that separate us from everyone in the world.
Degrees of separation. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's 6 degrees, if I'm not mistaken.
6 degrees. That's it. Yeah.
I realize that I am one connection connected to pretty much everyone in the world because of my network. And I've taken it for granted, but like 2 years ago, when the coronation happened of King Charles, I asked Colleen, my friend, who was former press secretary to the king, what are you up to? And then she sends me a selfie with Emma Thompson, and she's like, "Oh, I'm at the coronation. We'll call you later." And you know what? It's like for me, it was, it's like to know that you in your circle you have some. She very casually wrote, "I'll give you a call," and she's there taking a selfie with Emma Thompson. Or Netflix, The Crown. Have you seen The Crown on Netflix?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
Patrick Jeffson, who is my friend, who is former chief of staff to Princess Anna, was a consultant, and there is an actor playing him on the Netflix TV show. Now you've experienced this because you work with a huge celebrity, but me, I'm sitting at home, and I'm watching The Crown season 5, and there's an actor playing Patrick, and I'm like, I know the real person, I know the real Patrick, And then I write to his wife, and she's like, "Oh, you know what? They got the tie wrong. Patrick will never wear a tie like that." And it's something that I take for, I don't take it for granted, but to me, it's really unrealistic that I have this amazing network of people who I've built a genuine relationship with, and who followed me throughout the year. So if we close P World tomorrow, I will be completely fine because these friendships will continue. It's not.
Yeah.
And I could have been a better entrepreneur. I could have opened more offices. I could have made more money.
Yeah.
But again, one of my friends, always tells me, there are 2 types of entrepreneurs: the ones who run businesses for money, and the others who entrepreneurship is their lifestyle. I'm a lifestyle entrepreneur. That's what I am.
Okay, cool. One of the goals of the show is to bring people together to talk about the struggle. So you see here and you see here, but to get the backstory behind that. And you kind of brought all that out today. So for all the people that listen today, thank you for listening. I mean, your time and curiosity keeps this conversation alive. We'll be back next Friday with another journey, because behind every title is a story worth telling, and you get a chance to look behind the scenes to talk it through. So with that, I thank you all.
Take the CEO series with you anywhere, anytime. All episodes are now available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and major streaming platforms. It's not just an interview. It's a masterclass in leadership.